Look at that.
Hello.
We are all here. We even have Ben Milton. Look at that.
Who may be
We
Spider-Man
are all
now.
here. Whoops.
I'm not sure.
Questing Beast.
You're the first person to make that joke.
Yeah, I know.
What was the joke?
I said he may be Spider-Man now.
Oh.
We're not sure.
So, Ben and I formerly met at Gen Con, where we were part of the crowd of All Stars, where we played tons of games and everyone was having fun. And I had Ben scheduled for the show, and then he writes me yesterday saying he might have to cancel because he was bitten by a black widow spider. Spider-Man. You're gonna be called
Very
that
exciting.
forever now, by the way. So that's your new name.
That's fine.
Okay. Uncle Ben was bitten by a spider.
It all ties together. It's a parallel universe. Yeah.
Are you going to tell us the story of why there's spiders in Kansas?
Oh, I don't know. That's not my problem. There's probably a black widow. So yeah, I got bitten by a black widow and had all sorts of fun side effects for about a day. Feel a lot better now. But yeah, so now I have superpowers.
Did you try climbing on walls?
I've not tried that yet, but my strength and agility have increased. So it's pretty great.
Mm-hmm. So it was worth it. It was worth the trip to the ER. Oh my God.
They were like, yeah, that's probably a black widow bite. Keep taking your antibiotics. I'm like, okay.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you made your con save, right?
I know. I made my save versus death. I lost some hit points or con along the way, but I'm still with us.
What would that have been in Knave? A black widow bite?
It's a good question. Probably, yeah. If you want to go really hardcore old school, it might be just save versus death, or you might have to lose some points, some ability points. Maybe lose some con points. Get weaker.
Damn.
So not even just wounds to go directly through and
Mark is reading.
Pretty dangerous.
Yeah, you might have to find some anti-venom. It's part of a quest. See, now you got poisoned. I have to go find some anti-venom. It's a little adventure hook.
In fact,
make an alchemical harvested potion to cure the Black Widow.
Oh yeah, you got to find the evil spider that poisoned you. You got to take its fangs out and then boil it into an anti-venom.
Because of D&D, I had a misrepresentation of how deadly Black Widows were. Like it seemed like, oh, you get bitten by a black widow, you're dead. Like it was like that was it. There was no save. It was just you're dead. In fact, I think because of early Dungeons and Dragons, it helped me misunderstand the deadliness or non-deadliness of many things in life because I just assumed that's the way it was. So
yeah.
So did you just go around wandering with 10-foot poles in real life, tapping things in case like any tile in front of you was going to be deadly, and stepping on a crack really would crack somebody's back or turn it into hot lava?
We used to do some pretty silly stuff when we were kids. I don't know if we did stuff like that, but we definitely, I always say that, like the kids from Stranger Things, because the kids in that show are pretty much exactly the same age I was when it happened in the 80s. So a lot of that stuff in there is scary accurate. Like to the point of, I know people are like, some people are like over Stranger Things, or they're like, whatever. And I was like, not if you're my age. It doesn't matter. They can do no harm because they are very, very, very accurate to the point that one person I always see Stranger Things memes, and there's a picture of Will in like the first season wearing a shirt, and then a kid or someone posted on Twitter, it's like, here's me in 1982 wearing the same exact shirt. I was like, yep, because the wallpaper, I believe, in Will's room is the exact same wallpaper I had in my room. So,
well, that's research. They were actually just researching your life.
Well, whoever did it, this is my brother is in Hollywood, and he does this. He does crazy research. I'll give you an idea. He did Remember the Titans. I don't know if you remember that movie. So Remember the Titans, I believe, took place in the 70s. And in the 70s, they had this like mesh. Everyone used to wear it. It used to be this like plastic mesh that you see all the time. No one wears it. It's totally gone. And it was very popular back then, and it was because it was literally plastic, so it was hot as hell, but it had like holes in it. And my brother, they stopped making it, and he found the factory and the company that made it and had them remake it and start making it again specifically for the movie to make sure it was completely accurate. And then my brother did Ghostbusters. He did the last one. And same thing, like the patches, and he did the actual, the outfits, and he did research like where the wool even came from for like the logo, the Ghostbusters logo. Oh wait, hold on, I'll show you. How about this, humble brag? Ta-da! This is the actual logo from the Ghostbusters movie, and it was on their outfits. My brother took it, and this is like made with the same wool that they used for the original movie. So
it's crazy. I love that kind of accuracy. Like one of my favorite shows was Mad Men when that was on, and that had the same thing where they just had teams of people making sure that like the clothing and like year by year what songs were in existence and like what people's like did that slang term exist in 64 or did it show up in 65, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's because this actually, and you can feel it, this is like wool and it's really cool. It's very soft. It's actually not, this is actually very well made. And so Danny, my brother, gave me one of these. He's like, don't tell him you're not allowed to have that. So internet, look at what I have. Ha ha ha. Get my brother in trouble.
Steven, you're always getting your brother in trouble. I just don't get it.
Hey, man, they're all on strike right now. He's like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna work again at this point. So, but he's a costume designer. But anyhow, the point is, yes, in fact, in Stranger Things, Nancy was wearing in the first episode the same shirt that my girlfriend in high school used to wear. And I was like, oh my God, like the accuracy of that show was insane. So, which is really weird because the guys who do it are like, weren't even born in the 80s. So I don't know how they know all that. So they're just hiring the right people, I guess. So,
yeah, probably.
Because, So, but that's the part of the job is like, my brother loves to do period pieces and he loves to do stuff in the 70s. Or as he calls it, the dirty 80s, because there's two versions of the 80s. There's the happy-go-lucky neon version. And then there's the dirty 80s, which is like where Roy was really like, because it was still remnants of the 70s and the 80s, and it was still kind of gross in the 80s. Like you could see that in some 80s movies. Like if you watch Glow, actually Glow is a good example on Netflix. It shows the dirty 80s. Anyhow, so who are you? Not you, Mark. We know who you are. Ben, since people who are in my people who watch World for Combat might be only Pathfinder players or D&D players and they don't know who Questing Based is. I'm sure they do since your channel's like 100 times bigger than ours. But for those three people, who are you? And two of those people are me and Mark. So
I am the guy at Questing Beast, which is a YouTube channel that mostly focuses on old school D&D and just the OSR subculture in role-playing games. Mostly I do book reviews, mostly of adventures, but occasionally I do, DM advice pieces or like cultural commentary and that sort of thing.
So it's a niche within a niche.
Oh yeah.
and yet you still have like way more subscribers than us. Just check it. It's like it's a super niche, but yet 80,000 people like it. So.
I mean, we're also a niche. Everybody's their own little niche of the pie.
Oh, you're right.
And
no,
so I think that it's a mistake to try to guess something based on how niche it is. I remember when we were looking at like someone showed me some textbook sales back when I was in academia, and sometimes a textbook that literally seemed like it was made for like more people, like it was a broader topic, and true for some papers and journals as well. Nobody cared, but when you made it like this ridiculously hyper specific topic, then everybody who was in that topic was like, oh my gosh, that's my exact topic, I better check that out. And then it actually went up, even though you restricted it to like 5% as many people who would have possibly looked at it. So when it's about popularity and visibility, sometimes restrictions actually improve popularity.
Now you see that on YouTube sometimes. Like I run into channels that are like really weirdly niche, but are really popular within that because people find the one thing they like and like, oh, this channel just does that one thing. I have to subscribe to it. So I'm not going to get it anywhere else. Which was more the case when I started Questing Beast. There wasn't really very many other OSR YouTubers, although there's a lot more of that now, which is good.
Yeah.
So once again, do ask your questions, do subscribe, do like us, and anyone from Questing Beast, I promise you'll like the stuff we're doing. In fact, I'm going to start asking Ben to review our stuff, even though it has nothing to do with OSR. But it could be. It could kind of be OSR, right? Sure.
Maybe. People send me a lot of stuff. I have a public mailbox where people can send me stuff to review, and I just get a lot of books. And I do get books from people who are like, please review my stuff. And I'm like, dude, have you watched my channel? This is like not OSR stuff. I'm probably not going to review it.
I know.
But people send me stuff anyway.
It's not, our stuff is not OSR.
Our
The
stuff
closest we
is not
we
OSR.
have, I would say, is one of the
Not even
chapters of the
close.
Eldamon book has random tables that figure out a lot of things about your Eldamon. But that still doesn't mean that the entire book is OSR, because it's also full of like special elemental powers and like Eldamon special abilities that are a bigger stat block worth of stuff than you would have in like an OSR creature.
Yeah. So we already have a few questions. I want to know, where did the idea of Knave come about?
Oh, so that came about back when I was teaching. So I taught 5th grade for 8 years. And
Wow.
I kind of retired from teaching because I just pretty much do my channel now, which is kind of amazing. But when I was teaching, I was running a regular D&D club for the 5th graders I was teaching after school. And I was trying out different systems, and I wanted them to have a OSR system that was compatible with lots of different old school D&D systems and modules and stuff like that. But I wanted to make it as easy as possible to pick up and learn. And old school D&D is pretty easy to learn, but I wanted to make it even more streamlined and make it very just intuitive. And so I just tried to boil things down to a very simple format that I could teach in like 10 seconds. Didn't have classes. I didn't have to teach them how the different classes work. They could just sort of choose the equipment that they wanted and write down their stats, and they could just go. So that's where the original idea for the system came from, just figuring out a good way to play D&D with these kids. That was the first edition, which was like 7 pages long, and I just put it online as a PDF. And it ended up being way more popular than I thought it was going to be. I think it was on TTRPG's front page for a year in the top selling under $5 category. And I don't know why that happened, but I guess it really caught on. And so I eventually started expanding it, and people wanted to have it be a little bit more fleshed out. And that's how Knave 2 kind of developed over time.
Wow. So you right place, right time. You're like, oh, let me just put this thing out. And okay, it'll just be on the front page for a year. And everyone will download it and play it and use it and love it.
Yeah, so I got really lucky. That was unexpected. The only other system I'd put out at that point was Maze Rats, which was also pretty popular.
Oh my God, that A plus for the name. That is a good name. I love that name. Maze Rats.
Well, everyone thinks that you actually play mice in it, so maybe it wasn't the best name.
No. We have Battle Zoo. You think people are battling in a zoo? It's just
confusing because there's another OSR game called Mouse Ritter, which is quite good.
Oh, that's a good name. That's good too.
You actually do play mice.
Yeah.
And so people think that Maze Rats is like Mouse Ritter, but you don't actually play mice in it. So
yeah, I can see where they would get confused. They would think it was like Mouse Ritter, but in a labyrinth.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Maze Rats. Damn. I'm looking for a good fantasy football name. That might be the name of my new team.
The Maze Rats.
The Maze Rats. Hey man, it's hard. Hey, coming out with good names is tough. Well, the name of my fantasy baseball team is the Lab Rats. So that could be why I like it. And and I've had that for like 37 years just because I'm always tinkering. And also I'm from New York, so everyone used to joke. It's like, oh, it's all the rats in New York City. Oh, like, no, it has nothing to do with that. But anyhow, so maybe I just like rats. I don't know.
For like a year or two, I had a job as a freelance namer. So I would work with like advertising companies or branding companies specifically, that were trying to come up with names for products, and I would brainstorm product names for them.
Mhm.
So I feel like I got pretty good at just brainstorming names. Yeah.
There you go. Maybe I'll
One of the
start
weirder
using
jobs
it.
I've had.
Hey, I trust me. Not only do you have to brainstorm names, but then you got to do the search on the history of the name with your lawyers, and then you got to figure out what it means in other languages, and then you got to see if you can get the URL. It's a lot. It's actually a lot of things you need to do. So it's freaking hard. Anyhow, so what is the genesis of Knave 2?
Yeah, so it evolved out of Knave 1. People liked the basic system from Knave, but they wanted it to be more fleshed out. They wanted more detail on how you would handle different situations, how you're going to do overland travel, how you're going to do dungeon crawling. And I always just said you could just bolt on systems from other OSR games, which is totally true. But people wanted everything to be in one package. And I wanted to make a book that was just longer and was really a fully complete book, because most of the systems I'd put out are just like pamphlets, basically. I wanted to get an illustrator, make it look really pretty. I wanted to do a nice, hardback print run. And so I launched that on Kickstarter, and that really took off as well. So I'm mostly done with the writing for that. Mostly what I'm looking for right now is all the art to come in, which I'm sharing to my Kickstarter people as that comes in. And that's shaping up to look really good.
No, how much art is going to be in the book?
Right now, let's see, I'm commissioning, is 11 plus so around 18 pieces by Peter Mullen. And then I'm getting some art done by the YouTuber Map Crow, who does these really great maps to do some example dungeon and an example hex crawl that people can use as sort of a starting point for their own campaign.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's like wow, I wish I had 15 pieces of art in my stuff. I mean, I think
so what I'm seeing right now, it's around 80 or so pages.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, Stephen. But even
I
if
know.
pages,
well, no, yeah, because
of 15
they
pieces of art.
Yeah, but there's a lot, and we'll get into that because they have tables. The tables can double as art, which is interesting because tables, it's hard to put art around tables. So if you have a lot of tables, you actually need less art. So it sort of balances itself out.
And tables draw your eyes some way, a little more than just a whole bunch of running text.
Yeah, exactly. Also, it's very hard to actually put art next to tables or inside because it messes up. The table has to be a square, so it's really, really, really tough, and it messes up your layout. So you don't need as much. And if you do have art, it's usually full art. It's usually full page, or maybe half page or spot, but it's usually very specific. So
yeah, I don't know how people do it who have the weirdly shaped art on their page, and then the text is I never figure out how people do that. It drives me crazy.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
That's all I do, baby. That's all I do all day. Hundreds and hundreds of pieces of art. It's I've told Mark, it's like a puzzle. It's actually it's relaxing and satisfying because it's I got this much text, this many pages, this much art, fit, and then you gotta figure it out, and it's fun. Yeah. It's fun.
So we had a super chat from Duct Tape Man.
Go ahead. Yeah.
That said they've been using Knave and Deathbringer to hack together a system for running one shots.
Oh my god,
that's awesome! I have not yet read Deathbringer. I need to read that though.
Death Knave or
Knavebringer.
Knavebringer. Yeah, there we go. Get the professor. We get he's busy right now because I was talking to him because he starts school. Now I think I think it starts now, and he's once he goes start school, it gets very hard to get in touch with him. So
part of when we were talking at Gen Con, one thing I discovered, we were talking to all the different YouTubers, just the sheer number of people that were teachers.
No, we did a poll. We said who was a teacher, and everyone rose their hand.
Yeah, me,
everyone. Yeah, me too. We all have.
A lot of RPG people are teachers, and one thing I noticed is that there was a time that I went to a GM 201 seminar that was advanced GMing tips, and it had a practicum section where also people were being rated, and all of the people who got the highest scores on dealing with the weird, difficult situations that were little skits were teachers also. Because I mean, that makes sense because teachers have to deal with classrooms and other things like that.
I think it makes sense also because teachers have to not necessarily be outgoing, but you have to be able to be comfortable, explaining concepts and talking to people and commanding a room. And I don't know, it seems like a lot of qualities of good teachers seem to be good GMs and, people who explain rules. And it just there's a lot of overlap, like a huge amount between a
lot of crossover skills.
Yeah.
That's what I discovered. And like a lot of personality crossover, because usually teachers are the sort of person that are just like interested in everything and just like learning stuff and just like going to all sorts of different fields, especially if you're in like, I don't know, middle school or high school where you're maybe teaching a bunch of different classes in different fields. And GMs are the same way, right? You're interested in like languages and cultures and mythology and all of this stuff. So you have to be kind of a Renaissance man mentality.
So let me ask you, because you sent me Knave 2 and I looked it over and I wrote back to you and I was like, there's a lot of tables in this thing. I was like, which is great. It's just so funny because I was like, what is it with OSR and tables? Seriously, now you're the OSR master. So, and all these, not just yours. I didn't look at Deathbringer, but Kelsey's game, Shadow Dark, she has tables. Like they all, and obviously DCC is like filled with tables. Why is it that? What is the love of tables that makes it OSR?
I think it's because one of the hallmarks of the whole old school scene is a fixation on the setting over the rules, on the actual place where the things are happening, and making that a very consistent, real place, and making it easier for the game master to prepare stuff, but also allowing the world to be its own place and to sort of have its own life that even the game master can't expect. So tables are a huge help for that. And just making your worlds very varied and also very like concrete and, having their own reality. So like Knave has so many tables because Knave is only partially a rule set. It's the other half of it is basically a world building kit. So I have tables that cover most of the main elements of fantasy, right? So NPCs and monsters and items and elements and spells and stuff. So all the different things you would typically find in a fantasy novel, even, I just taken them into different categories and broke them down into like 100 examples each. So I have this kind of like elements of fantasy that you can reassemble into different stuff really quickly. So hopefully that makes world building really quick, and it makes it so it's not like you can't improv stuff. Like I can improv locations that you come across, off the top of my head, but most people have a limited, stack of things that they're going to be pulling from. If you come across a random encounter or a random location 10 times, eventually you can start recycling things. But if you have a list of 100 or 1,000 different things, then it's going to be a lot more varied. And that's going to make your world feel more like a real place.
Wait, we do have something that's OSR, Mark. Otherworlders is OSR.
And Otherworlders has random tables, but but they're for power-ups that are not very OSR-ish because of the fact that they're like cheats to be better at things. They may be a little more similar to OSR
pretty close
than other things that we have. But yeah, for OSR, the tables are more so about, I think, like emergent gameplay and how it can surprise even the GM because you're figuring out what things are going along with the tables and using them to guide the story rather than just having all the story decided ahead of time and kind of going along the rails.
Yeah, OSR games are very player-led. And if you're in a very player-led campaign, you need to have the ability to just improv or at least assemble stuff from tables or from prompts, depending on where players go. Like if they decide we're going off in this direction, right? Okay, we're going off to that hex. What's in that hex? I mean, roll like, give me 5 minutes, I'll make something up. And then you can make something up pretty quickly.
The Quicksand Convent.
Yeah, there you go.
I just rolled on the locations and structures.
That's great. You got a convent, and then I was slowly sinking into quicksand. Maybe there's people to rescue in there or treasures, but yeah, they have a limited amount of time because it's going to be under sand in an hour. It's like you got a whole thing there.
Yep.
So they said you have a really good blog post called Role-Playing Games versus Adventure Games. What's that all about?
Oh, I think I wrote that a while ago. I think that was just a post about terminology. That's just personal preference. I like the term adventure game over role-playing game, just for the kinds of games that I write. Not that there's anything wrong with RPGs. I certainly call Knave an RPG on Kickstarter because that's what everyone recognizes. But like an adventure game, I think gets closer to the heart of what an OSR game is, in that it's focused on the world and the adventures that happen there. And rather than role-playing per se, although of course role-playing happens. And that's something that's common in the earlier times in the hobby. If you look at like the early books that TSR put out, on the spine, it doesn't say role-playing game. They all say adventure game on the spine. Like that's what they were called for the early part of the hobby before everyone sort of agreed on calling them role-playing games instead. Because for a while, no one knew what to call them.
Well, I know. we call them D&D. That's what you see, that's what really happened, because there were so many of these games out at the time, and we would just, for whatever reason, they just became D&D. It didn't matter what you were playing. It's sort of like in the South where they call everything Coke, even if it's Pepsi or any other soda, it's still called Coke. It's like, or Xerox became, a term for mimeographing.
Kleenex instead of a tissue.
Right. So it's just D&D just became the name, and didn't matter if you were playing Top Secret or Gamma World or Traveler or whatever. It was like, oh, it's D&D. But then eventually, role playing. I don't know where that actually came from. Video games. I'm 99% sure, because I saw that more often in because there was the Apple II Plus role playing games, and I think that's where it sort of transferred on to.
There's a book that I haven't finished reading called The Elusive Shift, by John Peterson, who wrote Playing at the World, and the whole book is about the very early days of the hobby, like after D&D comes out, and everyone is just trying to figure out, like, what is this thing that's been created? Like, what is this kind of game? And all the discussions about, trying to hash that out. And I think in that book, it talks about how, like, the term role-playing game became more prevalent, but
interesting.
I haven't finished it yet.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even know he wrote another book. I got to check that out. However,
he has like 3 or 4 books now. They're all great.
I learned, because Mark knows I watch a lot of things about movies, I learned where the term blockbuster came from. Did you know that? Yeah. I thought it just was a term, but I was like, no, that actually was invented. Because you hear that, like blockbuster. But where did it come from? Do you want to know? I will teach you. So back this is where it came up. I was watching over the weekend, my son was watching Jaws, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, by far. And I actually took the history of Steven Spielberg films in college, so I know way too much about Jaws. Anyhow, Jaws is considered the first blockbuster movie in history, a first summer blockbuster. It came out in 1975, and the reason is because the lines to see it were so long that they would bust the block. They would actually go past the block and go around the block. And the term started to become sort of useful. But then in 1977, when another movie came out called Star Wars, that really caused the blockbuster. And that's where people called them blockbusters, because the blocks of people lined up literally went past the block and down the street. And I remember in 1980, I went to go see The Empire Strikes Back. And you would have to, and because they didn't sell the tickets ahead of time, we would go online, down the blocks, wait 2 hours. They would watch the movie. People would come out, because there's only like one theater. We would all move up, stop, wait another 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Let those people, we'd have to wait for the whole movie, and then we would go in.
Right.
So you have to wait online for like 4 hours, 5 hours.
That's crazy.
I had to do the same thing for Conan, and I had to do the same thing for Return of the Jedi. I remember that. I had to wait. Can you imagine today? Like,
I remember as a kid having to wait in lines to go to movies.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a thing anyone does anymore. Like, people don't understand like how big. I recently read a book on the making of Star Wars, the original movie. And like, I had my dad was around at the time, but I didn't know what an insane phenomenon it was. Like there was people that would go and watch the movie every day, every weekend,
constantly. Yeah, constantly,
like nonstop. So the movie was just like the #1 movie for a year and never left theaters. Which is like unthinkable now, but like that was just the reality.
Well, because it was so beyond ahead. I mean, I remember when it came out, and it's like that's all everyone thought. So that was it. Like that's all people talked about. Like you couldn't even imagine. And yeah, the lines were when I waited online, I still remember this, is that we went to go see the Return of the Jedi. We waited online and then we stopped right in front. We were the first people for the next show. And I'm like, oh, so it's one of those like good. Now it was with me. At that point I was 13. So it was me with like 20 of my friends. So we're waiting our 2 hours, 2.5 hours, doing whatever we do. And then you heard on the announcement, it's like, we are now letting in for Return of the Jedi. Will you please come in a calm, orderly fashion? And as soon as they said calm, orderly fashion, everyone went, "Ah!" and screamed, and it was just rush. It was this mad rush. It was a mosh. Everyone just crushing themselves into the theater because we couldn't wait anywhere because you're waiting for like 5 hours. I was like, it was total bedlam. I was like, oh yeah, those were the days.
If people don't believe you, there are YouTube videos online of like news reports going to the lines for Return of the Jedi.
Oh,
and just
yeah.
Interviewing people in line and people just going berserk and like rushing the doors. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta look that up. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's me. Who knows?
It could be.
And it was two. And back then, because you would have like one theater, and the marquee, I remember the marquee was like the size of my house, and it just said Jedi. 4 letters of like the biggest letters I've ever seen. And it's like, that's all they needed to say. They didn't need to say anything. It was like just Jedi. That's all you would see. And people didn't even realize back then, like you would wait 3 years. It's like, okay, here's the movie. You'll see the next one in 3 years, and you'll know nothing about it because there is no news or information and no leaks and no, there was nowhere to find anything. Starlog. That was about it. So anyhow, we kind of veered off things, but now you know where blockbusters came from, and you know about movies.
Well, I looked into the use of role-playing game, and apparently in the 1960s, it was sometimes used by psychologists and also political war games that the U.S. military is like, well, we're going to be role-playing, you take the role of Russia or something like that.
Interesting.
And then it appeared briefly in apparently somebody said in a minor Tolkien-based live-action game in 1973. And at least in early D&D, the first time Gygax mentioned it was in 1975 when he was responding to someone who said that role-playing may be part of why people like D&D, and Gygax was like, nah, that's not why. That's not what it's about. It's about the constant challenge and problem solving. Yeah. But this other guy said role-playing was important. So it then eventually seems like it became part of the lexicon, but it sort of came in from some other weird directions that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, originally it was more of a medical or a psychological term.
Yeah.
So a lot of people thought it would be kind of weird to use that for a game because everyone would think that it was like a psychoanalysis thing.
Mm-hmm.
Although whatever his name was, Holmes, who wrote the Blue Box basic set, he was actually a psychologist, I think. And so he had an article, it's been a long time since I've read it, where he sort of shows the connections between the two things, because he was really interested in D&D as well as in psychology and talk therapy. Mm-hmm. So maybe that was part of the influence. I don't know.
It might have been. So yeah, that's a really fascinating topic that, from what I found, also there's very little consensus even when people go to large websites and just ask, where did this come from? Nobody can figure out exactly when it started becoming popular, because at least the first time someone tried to suggest it for D&D, Gygax was like, nah, I don't think so. Obviously, it caught on later on.
Yeah. Gygax was not into the whole theatrical side of the game. He thought that was very silly.
Yeah, well, he was all about the wargaming part. Obviously, if you read those books, all the history of what was it? The lightning bolt was a ballista, and a fireball was a cannonball exploding, and that's all they really were. Is they were literally just taking the wargaming terms and mechanisms and making them fantasy based. And that's literally half of those is just whatever was in their initial games. They just added a fantasy element to it, but Yeah, he was all more about the combat and the challenge and the killing. Don't forget the killing. Lots and lots of killing. So how deadly is Knave and Knave 2? Is it as deadly as Deathbringer, which according to the professor, he's never had like anyone go past like level 6 ever? Like in 40 years. So
it's so like it depends on people's tables so much. Like people talk about how old school gaming is deadlier, and it is in the sense that characters have less hit points. Usually there's not death saves, so if you go to 0, a lot of times you just die. It depends. Like in AD&D, I think there's other rules. But like it's kind of balances itself, because when you have a good group of players who understand the kind of game that they're in and understand that this is a higher risk, higher reward kind of game, they tend to just be a lot more careful. And if there's a big monster, they won't just charge up and fight it. They'll try and research it, or they'll try and figure out what its weaknesses are, or can we go around it? Maybe we can negotiate with it. And so there ends up being less of these, total party kills, because players just are being a lot less reckless.
Yeah,
So
it seems like it's about the social contract.
Yeah.
We mentioned this with Shadow Dark too. If it's like, if you just bring Knave to your group that's used to playing like 5e D&D and just doing auto attacks and easily winning against whatever they were fighting, or any OSR game, they might wind up having really high death rate if they approach it like that. And if they know what they're getting into and they also sign up for it, then they sign up for a different play style. And I think compared to some of the other OSRs I've seen, Knave is maybe like a little less deadly at first level, because you have those item slots that you can fill in. And so you don't have a situation where it's like, well, I rolled a 1 for hit points. If anything ever hits me ever, I instantly die.
Yeah, in Knave 2nd edition, you're not going to die in one hit, basically, unless you're fighting something that's really gigantic. You're probably gonna take a couple of hits, but the way it's designed is that it gives you a lot of feedback. So if you take a couple of hits, your hit points are down to 0, and now you're taking wounds in your wound slots, so you can't carry as much items. That's like a very clear sign you need to get out of here. You need to retreat, go back to town, heal, find a potion, find something, and then come back with a new approach.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was cool about Knave is that I honestly, for most games, I'm not really sold on the idea of your money becoming your XP. I know it was like the way it was done in Old School, but Knave really leans into it in a way that sold it to me, because not just is your money your XP, but like your equipment slots are part of your hit points, and everything, like your spells are actually also an equipment slot for the spell book. Everything is items and money, and it puts it all into like one sort of in-game economy, which I found to be a kind of elegant and compelling way to look at like the in-game fantasy world.
Yeah, I wanted it to be like very physical based, where everything was just like, you can see it's on your body, you're carrying your spell book. If you want to carry 10 spell books, you can, but then you can't wear any armor because you're weighed down by spell books. So yeah, I wanted to make it very concrete as much as possible. And like, I think when a lot of people hear about the gold for XP rule from Old School D&D, the reason why that's there is that it's an incentive to go dungeon crawling, right? It's a reward for exploration, not a reward for combat. So like in 5th edition D&D, if you use the XP for killing monsters, which not everyone does. I understand a lot of people just do like what do you call it when you just level up at the end of a session?
Milestone XP.
XP, yeah, that's pretty common now, I understand. But like in the official rules for the last couple editions, you mostly got XP for killing monsters, which is, probably going to incentivize people to go out and kill a lot of monsters. But when you get XP for retrieving gold from dungeons, you're incentivizing people to explore. And if you find a monster, you could kill the monster, but it might kill you. Not really a whole lot of reward for killing the monster. Maybe better to just go around it and try and find some more gold. So it was a very exploration-driven game rather than a combat-driven one.
Yeah, and in Pathfinder 2nd edition, if you go around the monster, you get XP for bypassing it, whether or not you fought it. The XP is more based on the amount of opposition that the GM brought to bear, regardless of what you did creatively or just by avoiding it, to get past it. Sure. And I certainly agree that getting XP only for murder is worse than almost any of the other things that you can do. And I think that the gold to XP really works in Knave. For some of the other ones, the reason I don't like it as much is that it makes you really penny pinchy while you're in the dungeon towards solutions that are going to get you more value to bring out to turn into XP compared to like other options where like if you can pick a solution between two choices and one of them gives you money and one of them gives you some other benefits, then you're also not getting the XP for choosing the other one.
Yeah. It's all about your preferences.
It's all about incentives. I actually did an episode recently on incentives and like what you lead you towards, and you have to pick something. And I think it's definitely better than XP purely for murder, because like what are you incentivizing?
Well, I mean, XP for just murder is totally fine as long as the murdering is really fun. Like,
it's fair.
Your game had better make murdering really fun.
It better be a war game at that point with very highly tactical, where you just want to do the battles and you're playing it for the fights.
Yeah. Well, like I totally agree that like games definitely have incentives, especially where you place XP. But like in some ways, I think that like incentives in role-playing games are kind of overblown. Because like when you sit down and you play a game, you'll realize that, players want to level up. They want to get XP. But like their moment-to-moment choices that they're making are usually not really based on that. It's usually based on just like what they find entertaining in the moment.
Yeah, it depends on what incentivizes them and what the game is teaching them about stuff. And each different game has something different. Like, for instance, to talk about another mouse game, since we had multiple mouse games before, Mouse Guard on Burning Wheel system. If you want to advance, you have to succeed sometimes and fail sometimes with a skill. So that's incentivizing people to try new things or try things that they're not as good at. Whereas some like more difficult or punishing systems, it would be like, no way. We're only having our best person try that, because who knows what will happen if we fail that check. We could just all die. So it's interesting. And that's why I love playing lots of different games that have different incentives, because you wind up getting different feels that you might not have even expected when you first read the game and weren't sort of internalizing the incentives that would be there that are sort of carried over by that.
Yeah. I just think that like a lot of designers, maybe myself included to a certain extent, just you want to create this system that like, I want players to play this way. So I'm going to create these incentives. And then you play the game and players are like, no, I'm going to go do this other thing. You're like, why? They're like, because I think it's more fun. You're like, okay. Players like create their own incentives. So I find that to be a really fascinating part of game design too, when players are like driven by what they want internally rather than necessarily what the system is trying to put on them. That can be just a really interesting part to explore.
Yeah, and exploration can be an incentive all on its own. Like you mentioned with the way the name is designed, is that the incentive is to explore and find your own goals and pursue your own desires and your own internalized incentives that are separate from the externalized ones.
Yeah. But like even in a deadly game like Knave, I've definitely been in situations where players are like, I really want to kill that monster that's way more powerful than me. It's like, you get no XP from it. They're like, I don't care. I really want to kill it. I'm gonna find a way to kill it. And you're like, great, this is gonna make a great session, because now they're thinking, they're planning, they're coming up with like ways to do it. And yeah, that can be great all on its own.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what adventures do you run for Knave? You handed me. Where's your book? I got your little book here. Look at this. Because I got everything. Ta-da!
So that's The Waking of Willoughby Hall.
Yes.
It was nominated for Best Adventure at the Annie Awards a couple years back.
Wow.
So that is a haunted mansion crawl. So you explore a haunted mansion while a giant is outside the mansion with a blessed bell smacking it into the mansion the whole time. So there's a whole bunch of different things going on. There's a number of different factions in there. The giant's blessed bell is waking up this evil mansion. So all the undead stuff is coming to life for you to deal with. There's a lot of, there's a couple NPCs you can encounter in there. There's some weird items and magic in there. You can try and fight the giant, though he'll probably just kill you. So if you want to actually kill him, you should probably find a way to kill him. And there's some possibilities in there.
There's a goose as an NPC. And look, right. he's on the cover. That is the best. You know what? That gets my vote. Professor said this is one of the best, if not the best adventure he ever saw. So.
Oh, that's nice of him.
When
I did not go to the last Gary Con, but apparently Mike Merles ran the Waking of Willoughby Hall at GaryCon.
Oh,
Someone told
really?
me that, who was there.
Wow.
So I was bummed that I missed that out.
Yeah, it looks. I can't get. Okay, see, this is your adventure. This is mine. So teach me what I'm doing wrong, buddy. Okay.
Not necessarily doing anything wrong. I haven't read your book.
I'm like, look at this thing. Obviously, I'm doing this wrong because I'm like killing myself, and yours is like it's so compact and well done and tiny and perfect. I'm like, damn it, man.
Steven, I can at least tell you that one of the things you're doing is ordering like twice as much art as even Paizo or any other company would do.
Really?
Maybe
Their-
not
their
all the
books
way
seem
to
pretty
twice as
illustrated.
much, but
No,
like
more like
anytime
3
an
times.
NPC was named,
Yeah.
he just ordered a piece of art for it, and it caused our experienced Paizo adventure developers who were the authors to be like, what? Really? Okay. And it makes it amazing that they're all in there. But I was also very shocked by how much art there was. It's great.
Oh
But
yeah.
it
I mean,
takes-
if I can afford it, I just buy more art. And yeah, it not only makes the book look nicer, it also helps running the game because you can just show them like, this is what the guy looks like, and they immediately get it, you know.
Oh yeah, no, I have pictures for everyone. Yeah, but then it's made me rethink everything, like looking this over, because I've actually been reading this carefully, and I'm just like, man, look at this, it's so efficient. Because I love the DCC books, but the DCC books, and we talked about this with Kelsey quite a bit, because DC books are somewhere between like a traditional Pathfinder or D&D book and an OSR book, because they're much thicker, they have a lot more information. You know, yours are literally, there's a room and it will just say smoke begins pouring out of all the chimneys. You know, it's like, that's it. Like, you just have like 2 bullet points, and I'm like, wow. Like, that's all he has. Like, it's really, meanwhile, I have like half a page describing the toilets, you know, but that's just a different way of, you know, role play. Like, ours is also a linear adventure. So it's told in the story. It's told like a movie or a serial, where it's designed that, yes, you know, it's there are areas where you can sort of go off the rails, but it is designed to be a linear adventure that goes from A to B to C to D, you know, and you sign up for that. Like, if you play ours, that's what you sign up for. But you managed to do that, not only is it non-linear, but does tell a story, and you do it through such... Yeah, I gotta rethink things now.
Well, I mean, it tells a story, but I don't know what that story is. Like,
Right.
by the end of finishing it, some kind of story has happened.
Right.
It could literally go. It could go 100 different ways. Hopefully, they're all weird and dramatic in some way.
Well, remember last week, Mark and I did a thing, and remember we had the secrets of good storytelling, and one of them was having conflicting factions, and that you literally said that without, probably didn't watch our video from last week, but half the things you mentioned were in this book of what we said makes a good story last week and a good adventure, and you literally...
I felt that was like a really strong episode of ours, but I think some people who hadn't checked it out yet, because it says top 5 game design tips, where they're kind of top 5 GMing tips, and they may have thought it was only for people who were going to like design a CRPG or something.
Yeah, well, it's fine. We did it, and people will find it. But I'm actually going to be doing a talk. You don't know this, Mark.
I don't know about any new talks that you're doing.
I am ending up and going to... I just got a text from them, so let me look up my email. There is a convention in Pittsburgh.
Oh, was it the one you were talking to Bob about?
Yes, Bob and Baron. They were going, and I was like, what? I want to go. And
go visit your old alma mater in Pittsburgh.
Well, yeah, it's the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo.
Oh, they invited me too.
Oh, well, now I'm not going. All right, hey, but you didn't go.
I'm not going to it, but no.
Oh, well, I got to rethink this now. But well, it's like, well, they invited me, and if oh wow, okay, well, I guess I'm not so special. I actually had to call him up and beg him.
Yeah, you weren't invited, so you're definitely we weren't. So...
No, well, I'm going. So now I'm invited, and we are doing a talk. Let's see, it's called Combat with Friends. And it's going to be Baron, Bob, Grace, and me. So
awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, we're going to do a panel. And the panel is going to be probably, we were discussing it this morning. How about this for funny? Bob suggested if we do a panel where we talk about lessons learned from video games and movies to improve DMing. He's like, are you comfortable with that topic? And I'm like, let me think about this.
I would say yes.
I
you
would
are,
say,
Stephen.
considering that's what I talked about at Gen Con, and it's my favorite subjects in the entire world, yeah. And we did a video on it just last week. I was like, I think I'm comfortable with that topic.
Maybe some people aren't comfortable with their favorite topic in the entire world because it makes them too nervous that they like the topic too much.
That's true, but it was just funny because I was like, yeah, I could talk about that forever. So, anyhow, if you go there, if you're in Pittsburgh, let's see, he gave me a discount code that I can give people that they will get 10% off. Hold on, I'm gonna start doing it. Here we go. There we go. You can find out all about it, and if you use discount code, so you code Roll for Combat 2023. You get 10% off if you're going to the Game Expo. And they've never been to Pittsburgh, so guess what? There
Are
you
you
go.
going to show them around to all the best places in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, of course. All the best food. Are you kidding? I'm going to get a car. It's great. I'm like, now that we get a booth, Mark. And I'm going to sell my books and stuff. And I'm going to...
That's awesome.
Jason McDonald's going to help me out. I'll probably wrangle Bob and Byron to help me. Because they're like, we got nothing to sell. I'm like, well, now you do, baby. You can help me sell.
There you go. When is this?
The end of September. It's like
There you
September 30th, October 1st.
So Bob could try to help sell his PDF. Not that you can like have a PDF literally there, but he did write for us in a PDF that'll be out by the end of September.
That's right. Well, the funny thing is, like, I know they're like, they could sell stuff, but like we really don't have anything to sell. Or I'm like, yeah, but I do. So
Just have an iPad on the table where people can buy their PDFs.
You can do that. You can do that
with a point of sale. Yeah,
you can do that. That's what this little thing. You see this thing, little point of sale thing right here. You can. Yeah. You buy anything you want. I sold my books and with credit cards at Gen Con. So it's like amazing.
Someone in chat is wondering if there will be a video release of your panel.
Yes. I'm actually going to try to record them this time. I didn't do that at Gen Con because I'm stupid, but I learned a lot at Gen Con because what's his name from Die? Who was that we were hanging out with? The voiceover guy, Derek, is that his name? Do you remember, Ben? He was trying to remember, but anyhow, he had a whole setup for like recording remotely, so I copied it and now I have it. So I'm like, ooh,
cool.
I'm like, I watched what he did, and he's like, he had this great setup, and he has these little remote mics and everything. So yeah, we're all set. It's fantastic. So I'll record everything. Why aren't you going? It's just too hard to get to Pittsburgh. Me, myself, and Die. So. Yeah, Trevor.
And I just I'm not a big travel person. I do a couple cons a year, basically. Like staying close to home if I can.
Well, I'm not a travel person, but Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh's my home away from home, so I have no problem.
That's awesome.
Anyhow, but yeah, it looks like I'm going to be doing that. And then, of course, PAX Unplugged. Are you going to PAX Unplugged? At least that's fun.
I don't think so.
Oh,
I'm going to GaryCon. At least that's the plan right now.
Oh, I'm into that. So I hear that's fun too.
Because that'll be the 50th anniversary of D&D, and all of the like creators of D&D that are still alive are going to be there.
Oh, that's fun and sad. It's like the creators of D&D that are still alive. I saw a picture today of like the 3 people still alive from Star Trek, and I was like, oh, like, God, I remember when those movies came out. Now everyone's old and dead. Well, that's why we have people like you carrying on the tradition with OSR and Knave 2. So
someone earlier on said they don't know much about OSR and want like the simplest explanation, like they're a child, about what it is, and we didn't really completely say it. We've talked around it a little bit. We talked about some of the underlying principles, but like we should talk about like what it stands for and the fact that the R stands for different things depending on who you ask.
Right. R stands for R.
Everyone agrees that the OS is old school.
Right.
But with the R...
the biggest division is, does the R stand for Renaissance or does it stand for Revival? Those are the two biggest factions. There is no definition of OSR that everyone agrees on. It means different things to different people. So I would say that maybe the two largest definitions of it, you have Old School Revival, which more looks at it as a revival. So you're looking at these old games that were designed and played in the 70s and 80s, and they've kind of gone out of fashion. It's hard to find the books, or it's hard to learn them, because if you try and read like AD&D, it's just totally inscrutable as to like how you're supposed to play this game. So those were the people that started the retro clone era, where they would take these books and they would rewrite them and republish them with different wording, so it was legally distinct, and you would get these rule sets back in print again to preserve them for people to continue to buy and play. And these people tend to focus on using the rules from Old School D&D and being very true and faithful to that. So that's more of the Old School Revival side. Old School Renaissance, which is more where I fall, looks at it more like a Renaissance. Like in the medieval era, the Renaissance was discovering all this science and literature and art from the ancient world, and not just copying it, they were using it as a kind of launching point to develop it further and expand on it and see where it could go. And so I'm more on that side of the field, where I look at it more as a style of play. And the rules for Old School D&D are quite good for that, but there's also other rule sets that you could use that would preserve that style of play and tweak it in one direction or another. So looking at OSR as a style of play, it's not one thing. I think of it as a cluster of sort of game design features that tend to kind of cluster around the OSR style. So stuff like if it has high lethality, if it's easy to die, so you need to be careful, or if it has an open world that you're exploring, so it doesn't have a pre-written plot, it's very player-led. I wrote down a couple of things here. Emphasis on problem solving and being very exploration focused. Doesn't really have much of a regard for encounter balance, because the encounters are balanced by the players rather than the GM, because the players need to figure out if this is something they should tackle or not. Random tables, like you guys have mentioned, a kind of a do-it-yourself attitude towards the game, where it's like, I'm going to take it apart and put it back together. All of those things are just different features that tend to cluster around the OSR style of play. And so if a game has lots of those things, it's probably more OSR. If it has less of them, it's probably less OSR, but it's really more of a spectrum, I would say. If you want to read like one document to kind of sum it up, there's one called the Principia Apocrypha. If you type that in with PDF, you'll find it. It's a free PDF. And it's a document that, who made it? Perry, I forget his first name, put together. And it has bits of advice from me and Steve Lumpkin and Perry, all sort of talked about the OSR in different places. And he kind of combined it all into one document to kind of summarize how the playstyle works. But again, it's not any kind of authoritative document. It's more just like our perspective on it.
That makes sense. And I guess if people watched the Shadow Dark episode a couple weeks ago, that was also very much in the Renaissance style from the way that you were separating them. Now, we had a related question from Knights of Last Call Super Chat that says, an oft-debated topic is, what is the line between OSR and not OSR? And they're curious on Ben's thoughts on the spectrum from OD&D to 5e, which Dungeons and Dragons would not be considered old school. When did it stop?
So, I mean, most people would say that it stops at AD&D first edition, but it is ultimately an arbitrary distinction. It depends on what you mean by the terms. If you're talking about the play style, then all of them can be OSR. Like you can play 5e OSR style. And as long as you incorporate most of those things, where it's very player-led, it's, encounters aren't balanced, it's about problem solving, then it's pretty much an OSR game. Like, people forget that when 5e was first released, at least in the OSR scene at the time, it was sort of heralded as a huge victory for the OSR, because it intentionally incorporated so much of the OSR thought and playstyle into its design. It's not seen that way anymore, but that's the way it was kind of initially formulated. So for me, it's more about the way that it's played. I can play almost any role-playing game and play it in an OSR style if you just run it that way. If you're talking more about the rules, people usually think it cuts off at around first edition.
Yeah, because I know 5e is definitely closer to the OSR style than 4e. 4e probably, like, of the editions that are out, I would say that 4e would be maybe the hardest to play in an OSR style, but you still could do it. But it would be the hardest because there are a lot of like elements you would just remove, the very meta elements, like this is a minion, and since I have designed it to be a minion, it dies if it takes any amount of damage, and this is a boss, so therefore it's more powerful, is very anti-OSR, where it's just like, no, this is the monster. It may be much higher level than you. You're not always going to fight monsters that are your level, but one of them is called a boss and one of them is an elite, and it's been engineered to be the appropriate amount to replace this many normal enemies. I would say second edition is generally not considered to be old school by a lot of the people who are looking at where the division is, but it's pretty similar to first in how easy it is to run in an OSR style, at least. Whereas third and fifth are both a little harder, and fourth is probably the hardest.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I haven't played fourth. But from what I understand of fourth, it's a very combat focused, which was not necessarily very OSR. And it's very chess-like and very like mechanized, where all of the interactions all have like rules that you're following to sort of work out how things work. Whereas in the OSR tends to be much more rules light, to be more emphasis on looking at what's the actual situation in the world. And if you can come up with a way to overcome that doesn't require dice being rolled, then it just works. Right. So one of my favorite examples of this is actually in 5e, though I think it's true in a lot of other editions. There's like the hold person spell, right? So you cast hold person and then you read, what is this spell? What does it do? It holds a person, right? So they cannot move. They're stuck still wherever they are. And then it says, like, if you've cast hold person on someone and you make an attack on them, you can gain advantage on that attack. And so that's like a mechanized way of explaining what's happening there. In the OSR, that doesn't make any sense. So in the OSR, like, if I'm attacking a person and they literally can't move, I should just be able to kill them, right? I can just walk up to them and slit their throat. There's nothing that they can do. So that would be like a big difference there, where is the rules coming first or is the world coming first? And the OSR very much is on the world side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like the chat also has several people who are like, yeah, 2e, D&D second edition is sort of there, and third edition is the hard cutoff. So it looks like, at least in chat, we've got people who are agreeing with that. Yeah. I think for me, it's always interesting because of the fact that sometimes those rules, like advantage against the paralyzed target, or they take a certain amount of penalty on their AC rather than an instant kill, come out of a compromise that no one is completely happy with, out of the idea of like you start with the idea of, well, the game is in some cases, when you're trying to go for a game that has certain types of combat styles, the game is no fun when you're going for complicated combat styles and very long characters and not a high lethality. The game is no fun if you can just kill someone right away. But then other situations where it's like, well, in previous editions, the whole person was a pretty low level spell. We can't just move it up to a level where an instant death effect is a more appropriate effect. And so then it's like, well, then the only answer in that case is to put an effect that is a weaker effect, even if, it doesn't make as much sense. Like I've had to deal with similar things when I was working on making games, where I was like, yeah, I just think a sleep spell should be higher level, because you should be really wrecked if you get hit by a sleep spell. That's not the kind of thing that if you have 10 levels of spells would be like the weakest level of a spell. Like when you're trying to progress from that, if that's where you start, where do you even have room to go? But then it's like, well, but sleep has always been first level. So we had to find some way. And in Pathfinder second edition, the sleep spell doesn't, like, you don't fall all the way asleep from it until like a higher level version of it. That was how we got around that. But like, I feel in some ways it's better to just make the effect stronger so that you can do something that feels more intuitive, because it's easier for players to learn when it does something that feels like it should.
Yeah.
That's something
Yeah,
OSR is great at, is making things do what they feel like they should.
I mean, like more modern versions of the games, probably starting in like third edition, are very character build focused, right? Which is like its own game in itself. And people like really enjoy that game. And if you're going to reward people for being good at that game, then stuff that like would allow you to kill their character right away is not going to be that much fun. So we have to kind of, they have to know what kind of game they're playing.
Yeah.
And it is interesting in old school D&D, the way that some spells are, because characters, like if you play basic D&D, you can start with a wizard that has 1 hit point. Right? That's a definite thing that can happen where you roll up 1 hit point. If you get hit by anything, you instantly die.
Yep.
But at the same time, a lot of their spells are way more powerful than in 5th edition. So you're more careful, but you also have a much more powerful impact that you can have on the world. Like in the old school games, sleep is an enormously powerful spell. Like if you cast sleep, which you can at first level, you can put a room full of goblins to sleep. So you can just like bypass a whole encounter, right? Or what's the other one? Like the charm spell. Charm spell, it charms someone so that they obey your commands. For how long? Forever. Like they're under your sway for weeks or possibly months, depending on what their intelligence is. So you basically just get like a servant that you can, once a day, you can cast a spell and you just get another servant. So a huge impact you can have on the world. But because of the high lethality, you have to be much more careful about what you're doing and think about your actions.
Yeah, very swingy. And it can be very interesting if, and like you said, if that's what your group is going for and that's your social contract. Because for all the people sometimes think that the less OSR games are still Rocket Tag, more old school style games can be even more Rocket Tag than that, where it's just like, yeah, my wizard literally dies if you hit me. But if you don't, then your entire room dies. And it all comes down to who can get the positioning, who can go first, and who can get their plan in action first.
Yeah, but there's also another thing that people forget about old school D&D is that people assume that it's very war game based, so there's a lot of combat, which there can be, but combat will kill you so quickly that oftentimes you avoid it. And also it has morale and it has reaction rolls, which modern versions of the game basically ignore. I think they're like optional rules in 5th edition. They don't really come up much, but like in old school games, whenever you encounter monsters, maybe if they're undead, that doesn't really count, but most monsters, like almost any monsters, you roll dice to see how they react to you. And it's only like a 1 in 36 chance that they'll instantly attack. So most of the time they're either neutral or possibly even friendly. So you're not actually just engaging in constant combat with stuff. There's a lot more negotiation and like bribing people and trying, oh, what if I feed this monster so it ignores me and that sort of thing.
I was going to say, I've had the story. I had a wizard that had 1 hit point. And not only did it have 1 hit point, I think it made him up to, it was either 4th or 5th, I think it was 4th level. And at 4th level, he had 4 hit points.
Oh my gosh.
Because he kept rolling a 1. So can you imagine? Now, how is that possible? It's because, well, in old school, you can get minions and torchbearers. And I had him surrounded at one point. In the very first level, he had 4. And then by the time he was higher, he had like 20. So I literally had 20 minions surrounding him at all times. Yeah. So he had 1 hit point, but he had to get through all those minions to get to him.
You're casting charm every day. You can get a new goblin bodyguard every single day.
Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, they just had, but I remember rolling that. And that's the thing. It's like, I remember that rolling that character had a 4 strength. And I was like, oh, what the heck am I going to do with a 4 strength? And then he had like a 16 intelligence. I'm like, I guess a wizard, you know? But that's the character you remember. I can't remember the other ones, you know? So
it is easy to remember some of those things. And I actually came across at one point in like a living world kind of game, a character who was in a 3rd edition game and had 4 constitution, and they were level 7 and they had 9 hit points because the first level is maximized in 3rd edition. They were a wizard. And so they had 9 hit points, and the damage is way higher even than in generally in 3rd edition games than in the earlier editions. So I was like, I'm very concerned that you're going to make your saving throw for half damage and then instantly die. The first time that I've done an area fight, how did you make it to level 7 with the other GMs? And he was like, oh yeah, the GMs just never used any area effects. I was like, okay, so I might use an area effect. I'm sorry. And he made it to the end somehow through positioning and just generally not a lot of area effects. and being kind of ineffective, so nobody wanted to attack him. And then the boss used an area effect, was aiming at someone else, but that guy happened to be in the area. He made his saving throw and he died. So it's just that's what the characters you remember.
GM killer.
Is 9 hit points, Steven.
Yeah, those could be some of the best characters, you know? Like, I don't know. Like what I like in role-playing games, I'm sort of on Gary Gygax's team here, where what I like in role-playing games is challenge. But the challenge isn't necessarily rules challenge. Like I don't necessarily want like complex rules and mechanics to do stuff. I like being put in a dangerous situation and then having to like think my way out of it. That's really fun. So being a wizard with 1 hit point and I'm in a dungeon, it's a totally different game now. The game is now, can I get out of this dungeon without ever being hit? And that's like an interesting challenge that can be fun all on its own. Or like, you know, can I find a way to thrive with only 1 hit point? Can I find a way to manipulate the system and use my spells and use the world to become powerful anyway? Those are just like interesting things that would really engage me as a player. And they make for really memorable characters. Like that guy's never going to forget his, you know, really weak wizard that never got killed.
Well, until Mark came around.
He made it pretty far.
Made it.
Mark is just a killer.
Look,
Mark is mean. I know.
the enemy that was in the adventure had an area effect, and he was standing right next to the scion who did massive damage to it and who they wanted to hit.
So, in theory, as the co-writer of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Mark is responsible for more deaths than just about anyone else in this world except for Gary Gygax and a few others.
I don't know. Like, I feel like there are a lot of editions that had more deaths than PF2, so I think I'm not responsible for that many compared to co-creators of any edition of Dungeons and Dragons.
Well,
probably.
You'll never beat because John Statz.
Oh, sure, because if you count all the deaths in World of Warcraft,
right? He designed all the classic dungeons. It's like he's literally responsible for trillions and trillions of character deaths,
including literally the people who died in the Leroy Jenkins video.
Of course,
because he did that dungeon that was it, right?
Yeah, he did everything. So it's just amazing. It's like you think about that. It's like, wow, more people have died because of him than anyone else probably on planet Earth. So
why are people afraid of sharks?
What?
I'm saying, is it really death though in World of Warcraft? Because you just come back to life again.
Well, it's a stoppage of play. How about that?
Stoppage of play.
I'm just thinking, why are people
lose your character?
Why are people afraid of sharks or lightning bolts when John Statz exists?
That's true. That's actually not true. So there's a thing coming out on WoW Classic has this thing. I forgot what it's called. If anyone's playing it right now. So
where you just die forever if your character dies?
So it started off as a patch. It started off as an add-on where you can only do each dungeon once. You can only do it once. You can't use the auction house. And if you die, you're gone forever. That's it. Your character's wiped. And it has become so popular. So maybe this is OSR for WoW, that they're releasing it as an official version in WoW Classic. Where
people like challenge.
Yeah, well, that's a challenge because you really every combat is life and death, and you can't farm anything because if you go into a dungeon, you play once and that's it. You're never allowed back in. So it's interesting.
Can you kill world bosses that drop important loot? Is that how you get
once?
Some of them.
That's it. You're only allowed to do it
even
once.
Those things you can only do once.
Yeah, everything you do once, except for regular things. But the point is, it's to see how long you can get. And he kept dying. He played a hunter. It's funny because that's all I play is hunter. And then he's like, "Oh my god, hunter's so OP." I'm like, "Of course, hunter's OP." That's smart, man. It's not on a PvP server. It might be, but if he is, he never flags himself. But it's Chris Beamer who does this, and he got pretty far. He got to I think the 40s or the 50s, and then died. So in a stupid way, yeah. I mean, I think you can only go up to 60 or so. I don't know what it is in WoW Classic right now because it's using the same release schedule as WoW, slower. But it's very, very, yeah, it's kind of like Ironman, but it's very popular and people are doing it like crazy. It's a great idea, but it's interesting how it's coming full circle, because when we were kids, everything was hard because everything was hard, man. It just was, people didn't have balance. People didn't know game design. Like, things were hard, not on purpose. They just were. And then things have slowly gotten more and more and more easy. And now people are looking for challenge and they want things hard. Like, look at Elden Ring. And
Yep.
I mean, that's like, it's stunning how popular. I mean, that was really insanely popular and, hard game. And it's obviously extremely hard. And all these games that are just really, really tough and people are interested in suddenly.
Yeah, I contribute, or I can attribute a lot of the OSR success to From Software games and Breath of the Wild, both of which are like mega popular. And they're video games, not role-playing games, as we would think of them. But like a lot of their attributes have a lot of crossover to the OSR in terms of being open worlds and being challenging and being very player-driven. Whereas like, what do you want to do? You can do it. If you can find a way to do it, you can do it. And then just letting players go to do what they want. That's like a lot of people, I think, played those games, then looked for that in role-playing games. And the OSR was the best fit for those particular things.
So we have a question here. One of the things I liked about AD&D Gygax, where it was also resource management of supplies and spells, because deep dungeon delvers could, and then there's not run back to town, camping and wandering monsters, risk and supply management. So yeah, basically, it's interesting to see how things have become so like, do you keep track of your arrows? Do you keep track of your resources? Do you keep track of your weight? Do you keep, like, no one does any of that stuff. Everything goes into the bag of holding and no one keeps track of anything. But
in Knave, you keep track of it.
What?
In Knave, you keep track of it.
Yeah, right. But that's what I say. But in OSR and in the old school, you kept track of everything, man. You kept track of every arrow. Not only did you keep track of arrows, but I used to have the old, right. So if it went into a monster, it was lost forever, and if you missed, it was a 50-50 chance, and I would literally have them roll the 50-50 chance to see if they found it or not. It's like, it's amazing. It's like every single thing,
even in some non-old.
I know, right? In 3.5, yeah, they had that.
Still had that rule.
Yeah,
we just had a lot of people who were like me, where I was like, I recognize that I need to buy these, and that I'm not getting them for free. So you can see I have bought 1,000 of them. I have a magic quiver that can hold 1,000 of them. We can all agree I'm not going to shoot more than 1,000 of them before we're done with this campaign. So now can we just stop keeping track of them? I've over purchased.
Yeah, but
that's how I usually got around it, because just...
No, I completely agree. But I do think that the computers have changed this quite a bit, because we would keep track of these things because we wanted to kind of simulate the complexity of what a computer could do, but we had to do it using pen and paper. And nowadays we don't have to do that because we literally have computers. Like, I use this as an example, is that there's a lot of board games out there, because I play board games a lot, that are insanely complex. And I keep thinking, man, this is literally just trying to be a computer game in board game form. And it is. It's just, there's a lot of a lot of bookkeeping, and then sure enough, there's computer versions of these same games that you can play, and suddenly a game that's taking hours and hours to play, you finish in a fifth of the time, because the computer is doing so much of the bookkeeping for you. So I believe that I think computers are not making people lazy, but after 2 or 3 minutes of sitting there bookkeeping instead of role playing, or doing things like that, people are like, "Ugh, can we just get to it? Do I have to sit here and start figuring out how much weight everything is?" You know what I mean? Hold on, I gotta make dog.
Yeah, I think it just depends on your players and your group, and some groups really like doing those calculations, and it helps immerse into the nitty-gritty of the world. And some groups, it can get distracting, or they just always continually forget and then feel guilty or bad about it. So it works for some groups and not others, I think.
And that was one of the goals in Knave, was to make that easier, because I don't use weight-based encumbrance, I use slot-based. So you just have a certain number of slots, and if it's a kind of object that you could hold in one hand, it just goes in a slot. If it's like a two-handed weapon, it takes up 2 slots. And that way makes it very easy to see how much you have. You don't have to be adding up weights all the time. And it makes it just very visual. Pathfinder 2 does something similar, right? With like bulk.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah, I think I remember that. So I think that's a smart way of doing it, just to make, because I do want resource management to be part of the game. Because at least in Knave and a lot of old school games, a lot of it is you're going into a dungeon, there's treasure down there, but it's also dangerous and it can kill you. How far can you get? How much treasure can you get while still being able to get out without being killed? And that kind of risk and reward tension is part of the game. And if you don't have resource management, then it doesn't make any sense. So you need to have that in there somehow. The trick is finding a way to make it easily manageable for people.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And it also, like, you start thinking about, like, getting from level 9 to 10 in Knave, you need 250,000 coin. And if you spend 10 of your slots, which is a lot of slots, carrying coin, you could have 5,000. So that means that you probably need to go on 50 delves at least. And that's if you put an absurd amount of your slots into coin, which is pretty dangerous on the way out to level up. So it really just, I like the way that it abstracts everything into carrying slots that is throughout the game, because it's kind of like how some card games where it's like the way that you pay for the cards is by discarding other cards, and like they use a one shared resource that can make for a lot of elegant game design that way.
Yeah. Although if you want to speed up leveling up in Knave, you just get more followers.
Nah.
Get some people to go into the dungeon and carry the gold for you. Drag more out.
Life hack in Knave.
Yeah.
So what is the future? What's going on? What's the timeline for Knave, and what's past that?
Well, I'm really just focused on getting it out the door right now. I'm thinking about writing more adventures for it and more supplements later on. But the timeline for it is to hopefully get it all shipped out by the end of the year. That's the plan. I think we're on track for that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Though, of course, with publishing, there's any number of things that could come up. Yeah, that's just what I'm laser focused on at the moment. After that, I will see what is on the back burner. I got a bunch of different things in the background.
Mm-hmm. Well, you do what we do, like, do 10,000 things at once. So
I can do one thing at a time.
Not really. Yeah. We're insane.
We're always juggling more knives and torches in the air than we were before.
Well, you get used to it. We need a link for Knave. What's the link?
Right now, you can go to the Kickstarter page, which is just, if you just Google, Kickstarter Knave 2nd edition, you'll find it.
Oh, making me look it up.
I just Googled it. I found it. I'll put it in.
Okay, you put it in. You beat me.
Our plan is to open up the backer kit pretty soon, hopefully in the next week or two. And that's going to allow people to do late pledges and so forth. But that's not up quite yet, but there'll be a link to it from the Kickstarter page when that goes up.
And that'll be time to kill lots of adventurers. Is the goal to kill adventurers, or is the goal to just have fun?
The goal is to challenge the adventurers and let them kill themselves.
Oh.
Let them feel like they're the ones who made the decision that got themselves killed.
That's exactly right.
The rocks fell and everyone died.
Yeah. Every time a player dies or a character dies, the goal is that they should be able to say to themselves, oh, I probably had that coming, right? If they die and they say, I had no idea how I died, or, there's no way I could have seen that coming, then you as a GM probably made a mistake. You should be foreshadowing danger so they know the risks that they're getting into.
And if you're not, then they all die.
They all die.
Well, what
if
do
there's
you
a monster
do?
that can insta-kill you, have it insta-kill an NPC and let them watch it happen so they know it can happen.
So how do you deal with, like, one of the big topics is like how to deal with death in D&D or Pathfinder? Like, how do you deal with death, especially if you're in the middle of an adventure and someone dies or half the party dies? Then what? Because it's very hard to continue on these adventures. And it's like, do you keep going? Do you just retreat? Do they get replaced? Like, how does it work? Because you just slippery slope. And when one adventure out of 4 dies, you just lost 25% of the party. Can get a lot worse from there.
Yeah, you just roll up a new character and you keep going.
Okay, so it's fine. You're allowed to just say, yeah, we got a new one, and just keep going. And
yeah, you can it depends on, people do it different ways. You can have a whole session to introduce them and incorporate them to the party, or you can have Bob's brother Bob 2 shows up. It depends on what the party wants to do. But like I said, like in old school games, at least, generally the focus is much more on the world. So in a sense, if you have like these very long campaigns, you're telling the story of a world rather than telling the story of individual people in the world. People come, people go, people die, but the campaign continues and the world continues to grow and get richer due to all the adventures that are happening in it. And so you can start seeing your character may have died, but the long-term effects of the choices that he made in the past continue to ripple forward and are going to affect the campaign world. You have people in the old school that take this to an extreme where they go almost MMO mode, where they have a whole campaign world and they have multiple parties in the campaign world doing stuff in different places. And characters can like move from party to party and so forth. So that's like a very world focused type of game. It's hard to run, but people definitely do it.
And what about, do you have like the equivalent of a funnel where, they have in DCC where you have 4 characters and then, whoever survives is the winner, or, the way it works in DCC, you have 4 0 level characters and then you all go together and then whoever makes it, you become first level.
I don't have like specific rules for that, but funnels are really fun. You could easily do that in Knave. Just, I don't know, give everyone 1 hit point or give everyone 0 hit points so that just goes straight to their slots when they get hurt. That would be an easy way to do it.
Wow.
And just see how many you can get out alive.
Throw people into the middle of an arena with a bunch of like gear and loot there that is tempting for them to take. And then they have to get out through a gauntlet of traps and other weird things and see how many of them survive it. How much gear cool stuff they have left because they nearly died and lost most of their inventory slots, probably.
Well, what's your opinion on running one character versus multiple characters? Because that's something that people always forget in the old school D&D, is that you ran one character in 15 minutes. Like, you had parties. People are like, oh, party 4 players. Like, no, I had a party of 20 players, like 20 PCs. Like, we would have parties, like real parties, and it got crazy because you needed them, because they were dying all day. Everyone was dying. It was like you had the cannon fodder, you had the, as you said, the people you charmed. Like, you would go in with actual armies into these dungeons. It was crazy back then.
I mean, that's why like the rules for combat in D&D are so simple. Where it's just like roll to hit and then just deal damage. And it's just like, people complain about that it's so like flat. That's because it was designed to resolve lots of combat among lots of people all at once.
Right.
You have to kind of spice it up if you want it to be a little bit different. But yeah, so like running parties with multiple characters is, I think, a good idea, especially if you're tackling big dungeons. If you want to haul out lots of treasure, get a bunch of adventurers to help you. You might need experts to help you pick locks. You can, if you're doing overworld campaigns, you can hire mercenaries, start little war bands, because like you were saying, people forget that if you look in like AD&D, you look at like the orc entry, and at the bottom it has number appearing, the number that will typically show up if you have an orc encounter. And for orcs, it's like dozens, possibly hundreds of orcs show up per encounter, which means that like that's an army of orcs passing through. So you might need to have your own war band to deal with that, or you might just want to hide from them. But having an actual fighting group of people where you start escalating up into war game mode, like kind of above adventuring mode, is, I think, intentional in old school games, where you can move from just a guy hacking at goblins in a cave up to being a leader of a small army, up to eventually being like a local ruler. And then you move into almost NPC mode, where you're now just a local baron and other PCs come to you for aid and stuff like that. So it was designed to sort of scale up into almost like world governance mode after a while. And
how does it work in Knave? You just get one character, you don't run like 15?
No, you can have multiple characters. I have rules for getting hirelings, so you can get different types of hirelings, mercenaries, porters to carry people. all that sort of thing. I don't necessarily have rules for scaling up into being a local ruler. That doesn't happen that often. You have to play the game a long time for that to happen. But you can easily steal stuff from BXD&D on that if you'd like to.
So
I do have rules for warfare. If you want to abstract large groups of people fighting each other, I do have rules for that.
So basically never. Yeah, like who rules? It's like, well, if we ever get someone who makes level 5 to become the ruler, we haven't had a ruler in 20 years. Because everyone dies.
For people who have like those really long campaigns that go on for 20 years, then it might be plausible. But
well, Professor Dungeon Master has been playing the same campaign for like 40, 45 years, and no one ever.
They all keep dying. So
they all keep dying.
No one gets to be a lord.
No, but they're all dead.
It looks like a minor noble's mansion costs 8 million coin, and 500,000 coin is enough to level you up to the maximum in names. So you need a party of 16 max level knave characters who all bought in together and put all their money into it to buy the minor noble's mansion for your minor noble character. So I guess it goes to show, like, I guess the titles show, because the titles in older editions of D&D sometimes gave you a name or a title that was higher, but here knave is the title of the highest level, and you're just not a wretch anymore. It doesn't have baron or king or something in there. It goes
true.
Wretch, low life, hoodlum, and then all the way up to knave at the top.
That's a little bit of a joke, going back to how every level had its own name back in old school.
That was the best thing. I love that.
That's such a fun idea.
Oh, that was great. That was my favorite part, is to see the names and see how you like leveled up. It was great.
Well, Steven, do you think you're more of a cad, a dastard, or a gadabout, Steven?
Gadabout.
Gadabout, so you're level 7 then.
There you go.
It's pretty great.
That's higher than Professor Dungeon Master's ever had someone go. So
I've never even heard of that term, and I like it. Gadabout.
Oh, gadabout's a fun term.
What are you, Ben? Are you knave?
I get to be the knave because I made the game. That's just how, that's how it works.
Are you the knave master? What's the name of your GM or DM or whatever you call them?
Oh, it's just game master.
Oh,
I didn't try and get fancy with it. It was referee for a while. I just went with game master because everyone recognizes.
Now GM is fine.
What about Wretch Wrangler?
Why not Knave Master? I'm the KM.
Because all those new first level characters that come in after they die are wretches, so there'll probably be a lot of wretches. So
the Wretch Master, the Wretch Wrangler.
That's funny.
Are you the RR? I'm the RR. I'm the Wretch Wrangler. That sounds like
WWW. Because they both start with W.
Yeah. The Wretch Wrangler. Wretch Wrangler. That's all we're gonna do. Is we're gonna think of new names for Knave and all of his class. What classes are in Knave? Obviously,
there are no classes.
So it's just whatever you want to be.
It's a classless game. Well, there's no official classes. You kind of make your own class based on the equipment that you decide to carry and which stats you level up. You kind of become that class. So if you focused on improving your strength and your con and your charisma, you'd be like a charismatic warrior. You'd be good at fighting. You could have a lot of companions. You'd be good at negotiating with people. So you kind of create your class based on what
you'd be kind of like a paladin in that point, because you also have enough charisma to do more of like carrying the divine relics and that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Charisma is a more cleric attribute in my game.
What about how do you handle monsters then? In Knave,
monsters they work the same way as old school D&D. So I designed it to be, the game has stats work a little differently, but it is extremely compatible with old school stuff. So you could go to just like, BXD&D or old school essentials or whatever. You could just take their monsters, drop them right into Knave. They work just fine. So
it even has an eye tyrant and a brain flayer.
I saw that,
which are legally distinct.
No.
Really? The Eye Tyrant is exactly
Tyrant's not legally
Brain
distinct.
Flayer is different than Mind Flayer, but Eye Tyrant is exactly what he calls beholders as a secondary name.
Yes.
Do they own the name? Is it actually?
I don't know.
They own Beholder, but I don't know. You have to look that up.
Maybe I could double check. I mean, I just looked in there, you look at the SRD or whatever, and it lists the things that you're not allowed to use.
I think
Beholder's in there, so I didn't use Beholder.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure you can't. I think actually you might be right.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've seen other RPGs that use iTyrant.
Oh, I've seen
fair
others.
enough.
I see a lot who uses iTyrant, but I think
Yeah.
even that's a little too close, maybe. No, we're gonna have one, but we have
an evil eye,
Evil
which is definitely
eye.
a term that is just a real world folklore term from like hundreds of different countries, and it's
There you
not
go.
from D&D. So we're
It's
safe
not
on
from
that one.
anything that is copyrightable, or it's in folklore and ancient texts from hundreds of years ago. So it's everywhere.
One of the most diverse, like specific but also diverse folklore terms that you can find like across the world.
Someone gave you the evil eye.
Yeah.
There you go. So that's how we get around it. Because that way you're like really, really not even coming close to Beholder. Because I don't even think Beholder, I mean, I know what it is, but it's sort of like, I don't even know where that term came from. It just is like became
Maybe
a thing.
it came from the phrase "beauty is in the eye of the beholder."
Right. Who knows?
And so then, like they made a giant eye called a beholder.
They didn't. It
was really crazy near the beginning of this year during the whole thing with Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
Whereas like everyone was trying to like rewrite in the OSR specifically. Everyone was just like, do we need to rewrite like all of our monster names to make everything legally distinct? Do we need to change strength and dexterity and constitution?
Yes.
And I was like, no, you shouldn't. But people were really worried.
Oh, well, it's the people who covered it extensively. Yes, I know that all very well. It's like it was. Well, yes and no, but then people would have to sue you. Like it's like it's one of these. They can say it, but you have to prove it, and they can say anything they want. But then
that's true.
Yeah, it actually was.
My position was that like they would have to sue thousands of people
because
it's like the sheer number of role playing games that just use strength and dexterity in them.
No, they sue one. And then if one loses, that's all they needed. They just needed one to lose. And then they would just go after all the others and do a takedown and say, oh, you're going to get sued by us. And precedent is that you will lose. And there you go. So, but it didn't matter because it didn't come to that. So, but then you have a lot of games like Pathfinder Remaster where they're not taking any chances and they're just taking it all out and making it as... They're taking out everything. They're taking out Magic Missile, for God's sakes. I was like, really? Yeah.
I mean, they're not taking out that there is a missile. It just isn't being called Magic Missile.
It's now Force Missile or something?
I don't think we know for sure what the name is.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
Many people have guessed it might be Force Missile because the Pathfinder Adventure card game changed it to Force Missile because that is a card game, so it could not be OGL.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, but they're doing that. They're changing all the names. Force Barrage, legally distinct Magic Shot, something like that. It's all going to be. They implemented Mark. I don't know if you saw in Foundry the new version. You don't use Foundry, but the new version of the Pathfinder Second Edition for Foundry.
I mean, I use Foundry sometimes.
Oh, okay, well, it officially.
I don't run in Foundry because I run Theater of the Mind.
Well,
if I did run on a VTT, I would run it on Foundry.
Officially, they changed all the names in the newest version of...
oh, okay. So then you probably do know what it is when you looked at the Foundry version.
Well, it listed them. They said they're going forward, and it came out yesterday, 2.4, I think, and I literally saw that it popped up with a big list of, like, here's all the things we changed. I was like, okay, I guess they're moving forward with that, so... We're going to have to learn all these new names, all these new terms. I still don't even know what they ended up calling 5-foot step. It was a stride, and now we got to call it something else probably. It's like everything needs to be renamed.
Wait, they can't call it step? Why
no, they called it step. But I'm saying I just finally got used to saying that, and even now I'm going to have to... And that was one thing. Now I'm going to have to get used to saying 100 things differently. I'm never going to figure that out, so... See, this is why I like OSR, because whatever you learn, you can keep doing it. You're like, I'm an old man. I don't need to figure out these new-fangled terms. When in my day, we had Magic Missile, and we called it Magic Missile, and it's going to be Magic Missile to the day I die, because it's OSR.
Well, the OSR figured it out first. Like, what was it, Osric? Osric figured that out first. That was the first game to be like, we are going to rewrite AD&D.
I
the
remember.
whole book.
Yes.
We're going to do the whole thing, and we're just going to put the OGL in there, and we're going to see if you do anything about it. And they didn't.
No, I thought they did. I thought it was sued in England, and
I don't know all the details. I heard that like they reached out to them, but then they didn't actually sue them.
No,
anyway, they got away with it.
Well, actually, I'm pretty sure the story is that they actually were sued, and I think it was in Europe, in London, in England, and they won. And then that's what really opened the door up. And they're like, OSR was too good, and they're like, but it turned out to be the best thing ever, because they were like, wait, you can't republish our own game using OGL, and they did. So
like, yeah, you can.
You can. Right. I'm pretty sure when I was doing my OGL history, I might be wrong, but I
remember seeing that there was something that happened.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a lawsuit, but they did their homework. And they were like, oh, yeah, no, we were very careful and we followed it to the letter. And I don't think they realized just how powerful. They just wanted people to like, oh, you'll make games for our system. You know, that's what the OGL was for. It's like, you keep making games for us. It's like, oh, no, we can remake your existing games. Like, no, you can't do that. That's not what it was for. It's like, yeah, but that's what we can do. And then that's where the lawsuit came from. They're like, no, you
doesn't matter what it's for. It matters what it says.
Right. Yeah. And that's not what they meant. And they're like, uh-oh. And that's why you could do what you did today. And if it wasn't
that was
for
a big
that,
benefit of the whole like OGL fiasco is that like the OSR has gone absolutely ham on Kickstarter over the last year, where there's just been like 7 huge OSR Kickstarters with like more to come this year, and it's been absolutely crazy, like multiple $1 million Kickstarters.
Yep.
So
it's the biggest year for the OSR ever.
So how often can you play? I mean, because here's an example. Now, just bear with me for a second. I was actually talking to Derek about this. D&D and game design and role-playing design has come a long way, like a really long way. A good example is like, watch a very exciting action movie from the 60s or 70s, and you'll be like, wow, this was like one of the hottest, most incredible, reviewed movies of all time, and you watch it today and you'll be like, yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's okay, but with modern sensibilities and knowing what we know now and just what, action is considered, it will be like, I can see where it's coming from and it's interesting, but it's not what I want to do and watch every day for the rest of my life, which is 70s action movies, when we have, movies from 2020s, or with CGI, much more exciting. And, there's a lot of things in OSR. Yes, the tables and that is all exciting, but it's also ridiculously unbalanced, incredibly swingy. And, it's hard to get a story going. And to be honest, my group, we tried to play it for a while, and the issue with that is that after a while it's not that we got bored, but it felt like we were kind of just held back, and we would rather have played the more, I don't know, nuanced and exciting and, modern role-playing games with all their rule systems than some of the older ones, even the OSR ones. And I could see it. It was good for like a one-shot or once in a while, but it was hard for us to play it more than, after our 5th or 10th or 20th time, we were just bored. It just felt very samey after a while. You see what I'm getting at? And I'm just wondering how you feel about that. If OSR is really something that can sustain long campaigns for, especially considering how easy it is to die, and how quickly your characters just become Bob the 8th and Bob the 9th and Bob the 10th, It's like, do you really have a connection to them? And it's like, what is, the hook that keeps you playing OSR for long periods of time? Or is it just fine as a one-shot, and that's just, how people like to play it?
Well, I mean, it's obviously not for everyone.
Right.
People just enjoy different styles of play. Some people enjoy the mechanics of a game more, which is something I could totally understand. OSR is just not focused on mechanics. If what you enjoy out of a game is an intricate set of rules that you can manipulate and you can use to do stuff, like that's totally cool. But that's not what OSR is.
Mhm.
The focus is just so much on the setting and the world and the contents of the game rather than the rule system that I feel like a good OSR game needs that to support it. So for me, like when I do a lot of OSR reviews, and my favorite thing to review is not systems, because most OSR systems are pretty similar because they're all intercompatible. What's interesting to review is the adventures or settings, right? The actual content that you use to run the game. Because my experience has been that the best OSR adventures and settings are the best D&D adventures and settings. I think that there's some of the best content written for the game out of any edition come out of the old school. Because there's such a relentless focus on making that the interesting part of the game rather than the system. So like a good example is the game that's on Kickstarter right now, which is Dolmenwood. And that rule system is basically old school essentials. It's BXD&D, right? There's nothing particularly special about it. What makes that game fantastic is the world of Dolmenwood, which is a 200 hex crawl, where every single hex has an entire page of content written for it. So it is this enormously deep, interconnected world that's extremely easy to use, extremely easy to reference, and you can play in for years and years and years without ever exhausting it. And that's, I think, what is most interesting. The system doesn't matter all that much to me. Like I said, I'll happily play in a 5e game if it's written, or if the game is conducted in an old school style, where the focus is on player agency and on problem solving and being self-directed. So for me, that's where the juice actually lies.
Well, how many worlds do you need, though?
Right, you don't need that many. A lot of people just make their own. If I was to run a particular world, I would probably run Dolmenwood, because I've run bits and pieces of it before from the zines back when it was in zine form. And so I'm really looking forward to see the full world release, because I really want to run that. But what most people find is that like OSR games are designed for very long play, and they're designed to have worlds that gradually develop over time based entirely on the choices of the players, because it's so player directed. So over the course of years and years of play, players, again, like graduate to barons or kings. They start having large scale influences. Factions that are at play either become allied with them or enemies towards them. And the world changes dramatically over long periods of time. Again, all due towards the players, because the game master is very reactive. They're looking at what the players do, and then they're adjusting the world accordingly. And so the players feel like they have an enormous amount of impact and control over what happens in the world. And I think that's part of the big appeal.
What about you? What's your world of choice then?
My world of choice, I like running a lot of the one-shot adventures, like the dungeons. The ones from Old School Essentials are often very good. And I write my own little dungeons too. My long-term game is not in play right now. It kind of fell apart. So I'm planning on starting a new one soon once I get finished writing Knave, because Knave is in full tilt mode. And I play games with my kids. So that's where I'm at right now.
Wow.
But I want to get a big, large-scale game going again, because I feel like that's where the real good stuff is. You
do that in person or online?
I definitely prefer to play in person.
Well, everyone does.
I'm playing an online game of Traveler right now.
Oh my God, you're actually playing it? Is it actually being played, or are you just rolling up characters?
Oh no, I died in character creation, but then I made a new one who didn't die. And yeah, so we're playing original black box Traveler, like the
oh my
first
God,
edition.
And you're actually doing
really
things.
Fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Wow.
Because like Old School D&D, it is extremely player directed.
Oh yeah, no, Traveler is crazy. We used to play it a lot, and it was but the thing of Traveler is that it's so many tables that you can spend multiple sessions just getting your ships and your characters, and then finally you're like, okay, we've been playing a month. We're done. We're done making our people. Now let's actually play a game. It's like it takes so long. That's what I'm saying. It's like by modern, standards, it's hard to understand. I guess it depends on who you are and like what you want to play. Because it's like, like my players and my people, we like the fighting. That's their thing. It's like They like the complex, intricate systems of fighting, and the world is fine, but that's not what they want. They really like combat. They like to challenge. They like, fighting and having complex, long stories. So Yeah. But that's what they like, and kind of what I like too. So, but I guess I could see that. But also, it could be that we got it out of our system because I guess it could be like, well, I was forced to play D&D for so many years, so long, and now I don't have to. Do I need to go back to what we had to play? And the answer is not really. I don't want to go back. It feels like a punishment for someone like me. But I can see for people who've never experienced it, it's definitely cool and something unique because you've never seen it or done it before. So it's like it's something that's Also, it's hard. I mean, modern D&D is pretty easy, like very easy. In fact, I'd say, and it's like you said, like the Dark Souls and the From Software that people really enjoy the challenge and like, oh my god, this is really hard. Oh my god, I died. It's like,
Yeah.
And I died again. I'm like, wait a second, what's going on here? That's not supposed to happen. And then they really get into it, trying to figure it out. But like any of those games, also, it can get a little. I wouldn't call it samey, but you're like, yeah. It was fun the first 10 times I died, but it's starting to get a little samey here. Like, yeah, I keep dying over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different styles of play, and there should be different styles for everybody. So, like, what was nice about like the state of YouTube now is that there's just more and more YouTubers and blogs and so on that are focusing on different styles of play and really emphasizing what makes them really work. So people can pick the stuff that they really enjoy and then focus on it. Whereas if, you go back in 10, 20 years into like the forums and stuff on discussing D&D, there was sort of the internet had agreed that there was a correct way to play D&D and everyone was mad if you didn't agree with it. But now there's a lot more diversity of options in terms of different styles. And there's lots of different styles.
What do you think, Mark?
I feel like I agree with Ben that different groups have different preferences, different social contracts, and even just different things that give them hangups. Like there are legitimately some players that do not want to be self-motivated towards having to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. They'd rather have some big epic story that someone else came up with be generally happening, and then they decide how to react to that. And they decide how to take their tactic toward it. If you tell them, just do whatever, then they can get annoyed or either get lost or just be like, well, I don't, you know what? I want to know what I'm supposed to do. I don't want to just do something at random. And so you need to find the right fit for your group. And if you're trying to play a game that is doing the opposite of what your group wants in either direction, it's going to rub the wrong way. You might think that the game is like not as good in quotes, but really the game is good at doing what it was made to do, and it's not a good fit. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. There's some players are a lot more self-motivated than others. There are some players who are definitely more on the side of they want an experience, right? They're there for a thrilling experience that the book is providing for them, or the GM is providing for them, or whatever, or even the other players are providing for them. And that is absolutely fine. I definitely know people like that. So for someone like that, an OSR style of play just wouldn't be as fun because they're just required to be more self-directed.
Yep.
That can be it's a much more intense experience in a lot of ways.
And it can sometimes be a situation where it's not even just each individual player, but it's the gestalt of the group that pushes you away or towards things. For example, you could have one person who like hypothetically would like either a curated more theme park experience or a more sandboxy do what you're going to do. But you have another player who's very outgoing, is very, very gung-ho, and is going to come up with all of these self-directed things and draw everyone in their direction. And the rest of your group can't escape that gravity because they just don't have the same amount of enthusiasm or like zeal towards things. They just are like, whatever. I mean, and they might eventually have come up with something, and they might not have been upset doing it either, but they'll just go along with that person until they eventually realize we've been doing only this person's thing like the entire time, and we never do my thing. So like there's dynamic issues that can also wind up being better in one direction or another. And that's why I always say play as many different styles, play as many different kinds of games. And even if you play a new game and you're like, no, this style is completely not right for me, you probably find one or two things in it that you might want to take and bring back to the other games that you're playing or running as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look at that. We're almost out of time. But you are working hard on your Knave 2 Electric Boogaloo. Anyone ever called that before?
No, you're the first.
All right. There you go. I got to be the first at something. Really, everything, whenever something has a 2, you always add Electric Boogaloo to it because it always sounds good. Something 2 Electric Boogaloo. I would like to try out a game. If you're ever playing online, let me know or let us know. I would love it that if you killed off all my characters horrible deaths, that would be a lot of fun.
At least you won't die in character creation like I did in Traveler.
Oh, that always happens. And I play. Oh, that's right. I forgot to tell everyone the story. I killed Ben in our Mothership game.
I think you did tell that story.
I did. No, I told the story, but Ben wasn't there. I've told the story of how he sees how I play. I play crazy. And Ben, knowing Mothership and probably all of his years at Knave and Knave 2, he was far, far away from all the shenanigans. He got on his spacesuit, went into his ship, and left. He's like, I'm not going anywhere near those people. But
he completely followed the player duties page in Knave 2, where it says what a player is supposed to do of scheming, thinking ahead, fighting dirty, making sure you're not even there when the bad thing happens. I was like, whatever is happening, is there like goo? Sounded like the GM kind of
eat the goo
in your favor again.
Whatever was bad, I did it.
There's no way you would have been on his pod if he left that long in advance.
And Ben was like the exact opposite, but at the end, I ended up somehow being on his ship as the goo and killed him and then piloted the ship back to Earth to destroy Earth. And Ben afterwards like, how'd you get on that ship?
I agree with
shouldn't have been on that ship.
Any sense.
It did not make any sense, right? Ben was upset.
I was not upset. I had a very good time. That was a fun game.
No, it was. I think I left the airlock and got in from the outside of the ship somehow.
There you go.
Who knows?
I tetherballed a guy into another ship's windshield.
That's true. I forgot about that. You did tetherball. It was by the end. It was totally crazy. The professor blew up the space station. I infected and killed everyone. You were tetherballing other characters into other ships, and then that ship got destroyed. And then everyone died. Horrible deaths, except for me.
Appropriate Mothership ending.
Except for me. I ended up living by dying.
The slime lives.
The slime lived. I lived by dying. That's how you live. That's how you survive. You gotta be crazy. If you're not making the GM say, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Then I was like, "Oh, baby, now I'm even more sure I want to do that." And Barrett, he said that to me multiple times during that game. I was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Whatever you're not supposed to do, baby." So if you play Knave with me, you'll get to kill off my character hundreds of times.
That sounds awesome. Maximum mayhem.
Oh, it will be. That could be the name of the episode. Maximum mayhem. Everything you're not supposed to do, and then some. And see how many family members of the whatever family will be. It's like Bob the 50th. How many can we get up to in one session of Knave? But so do check out Knave and Knave 2 and Knave 3. Okay, there's going to be no Knave 3. I don't think you can
check Knave 3.
No, you can't. Not yet.
But here's Knave 2. I'll put the link in again.
Oh, there it is.
My YouTube channel is just youtube.com/questingbeast.
Questing Beast, where if you have something that's OSR, he'll look at it. Otherwise, Stop sending him
I
free
cannot
things.
promise I will look at it.
Well,
People
he
send
won't
me
promise
so many
anything, but
things.
you have a better chance of him looking at it than the 10,000 other things.
You know, one of our Eldamon has a questing beast ability.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
The ability's name is questing beast because it's Hidwin, the white stag Eldamon that's sort of based off of those same myths as the questing beast.
So the other thing is, do check out the Year of Legends. We just finished World of Battle Zoo Indigo Isles. That would be very
By just
curious.
finished, you mean we're not finished, but the Kickstarter
We
is over.
finished. We finished the Kickstarter, but now we already got another one coming up very soon. It's never going to stop. We're going to keep going forever and ever and ever. Every 3 or 4 months.
Steven's like a shark, according to the old legend about not being able to stop moving.
That's totally myth. Sharks sleep and they
That's
just...
why I said old legend.
Yeah. Well, because no one ever
Didn't
saw
say it
sharks
was true.
sleeping. Yeah, it's not true. But yeah, you can play an evil eye, an angel, a sphinx, a gargoyle, were creature, lamia, giant, golem, swarm, psychopomp, seraphage, and boreals. You name it. We got them all, baby. All the craziest things. You ever want to play? You wanted to play a gargoyle? Now you can. You want to play a creature that eats brains and uses psychic powers? There you go. You can. So we had a very, very popular Year of Monsters where you can play things like a mimic, you can play doppelganger, you can play a dungeon, you can play crazy stuff, and people loved it. So we thought, now we got the hard stuff out of the way. Now we're going to get really hard. If you want to play a swarm, yeah, we got it, baby. We'll figure it out. You can play a swarm in our games.
Chad has suggested a movie name, Steven Ado, the crowdfunding.
Steven Ado, the crowdfunder. Well, now I get the hang of it. And, well, we used to do one Kickstarter for like 5 projects. So instead, I'm going to do 5 Kickstarters for 1 project each, which just means endless kickstarting. At this rate, it'll be every 3 months, which is a lot of Kickstarters. But hey, man, other people do it. We can do it. Ian World, they do it like they have a Kickstarter every month. So it's just a more efficient way of getting your stuff out. So. And yeah, you can be like us one day, Ben. We have whopping 2 people here. All you need is one more person, then you can do this
more
too.
employee.
That's it.
There you go.
One more besides yourself.
I'm not even an employee.
Just one more paid volunteer. That it?
I'm impressed by your guys'
Contractor.
output.
No, I
I'm
know.
a very slow writer.
Oh my God. That is the one thing we are not. It's like we write very, very, very
We have
fast.
the need for speed.
We can write very fast. That's the one thing that we both have in common. Yeah, Russ over at Ian World is a machine. Well, he's my inspiration because I'm like, if he can do it, we can do it. But do check that out. And I'm going to be showing off the art. Oh my God, the art is just insane for these creatures. But, well, I guess, are you going to go to Gen Con next year, Ben?
I think so. I think that's what
Okay.
the plan is, as far as I
Alright.
know.
Well, you say you don't like going to cons, but I'm like, well, at least go to Gen Con.
I got to go to a couple cons. It was really great to meet up with you guys and everyone else, all the other YouTubers. It was just
Oh my God,
so
yeah.
cool to see people that I'd seen online, had never seen in person. That was fantastic.
Oh yeah, I mean, a Gen Con this year was crazy because usually I hang out with like 1 or 2 YouTubers at most, but then this year was just like everyone. They all showed up. Everyone out of the woodwork was there, and then some. And it was just like madness every day. It was so much fun. And then also the games themselves. That was the best part. It was like playing our own crazy games.
Yeah,
Were you in
Absolutely.
the? You were in the Goblins Ate My Kobold game too, right?
that was really fun. Too.
Oh yeah, that was. Well,
I exploited the giraffe meta.
oh
and I
right,
just
right. Oh, that's
stomped
right.
everything
You
with
were.
my giraffe.
That's right. You were riding the. He was riding a giraffe. You had the best character. His was the best one.
And I
Yeah.
picked a giraffe because a questing beast is a giraffe.
Oh,
It's the medieval conception of what a giraffe is.
That's funny. That's
Yeah.
right, because they didn't know what they were because they were right. I do remember that.
There are a lot of different takes on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense that it's a giraffe, and it sometimes had a snake tail.
It was a
Has
giraffe
the-
that
has the
killed
has the neck
great
of a
white
snake.
sharks.
Yeah, there was a sea full of sharks. And so I pranced around with my giraffes and stomped them all on the head.
Yeah.
Very effective.
It was. It was.
I also
My
rolled very
character
well.
wasn't quite as exciting in that one. I had some fun, but his was excellent because he rode. It was a kobold on the top of at the very top of giraffe, and then he went into the water, and there was sharks, and he killed them all by having the giraffe like dance in the water. It was crazy. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, don't mess with the questing beast, I tell ya. Yeah,
There
that,
you
it's
go.
been a lot of
It's
fun,
got
guys.
a leopard body.
yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to get a camera set up so that next year we can record some of these because
That'd be cool.
I know. That's why I got a better setup this year because I'm not going to carry around like recorders and stuff. I'm like, I got to figure out how to do what you could do with your iPhone and wireless mics. And I got wireless mics and I got my iPhone, so I think we're ready. So we'll see. Anyhow, thanks. And I want to try out this walking of Willoughby Hall. This
Yeah.
but you ran
Maybe-
out. You
maybe-
said
maybe we should run it, Steven.
well, when we have free time, which means we'll never run it. So.
Never. Just like every time we say maybe we should run it about.
Yeah,
all
we
sorts
say,
of
yeah, I
things.
don't even run my own games anymore. I haven't
You can
run
run
it.
it
I-
in any system that you want. You might have to
Any?
change some. You can change some monster stats probably. But
Any system.
the main benefits of the game is the situation and the setup. you
I'm
know?
gonna run
Uh-huh.
this in tune. There you go.
Run it in PF2 with Eldamon.
I'm gonna run it in Bushido. No one even knows what systems I'm talking about. I'm gonna run this
think
in
I've heard
Car
of it.
Wars. Will it work in Car Wars?
I bet you could make it work with
Oh,
enough elbow grease.
I don't think I can make this work in Car Wars. I don't think so. Probably won't work. So any system within reason. This is actually
Within reason, anything Dungeons and Dragons like.
Oh, there we go.
You can probably force it to fit.
So no Starfinder. Oh well. Although it
No
would-
Shadowrun.
no Shadowrun.
Instead of a haunted mansion, it's a haunted space station.
Right.
There you go.
No,
we got it.
Problem
no,
solved.
there you go. Well, no, you could do it. Yeah, that's Event Horizon. It's the haunted ship in space. You've never seen that movie. All right. Well, thanks, Ben. Feel better.
Thank you. I will. I'm feeling better already.
Feeling better already, and
Yeah.
stop getting bit by spiders. I don't know what you're
I'll
doing
try.
out there.
I make no promises.
And now forever you'll be known as Spider-Man. Forever and ever. Because
Everyone I know makes that joke all the time now.
well, in all of one day. It's only
All
been
one
one
day.
day, and it's already
Everyone thought of the same joke.
it already got tired. You're like, all right, it's been one day of me getting bit by a spider, and yet I'm already bored of the meme. So all right.
All right.
right,
Take
guys.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.